Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, the Ukraine crisis seems to be heating up. Today, President Zelensky of Ukraine sent out a tweet addressed to Jens Stoltenberg, who is the Secretary General of NATO, saying that, well, it's all very well our modernizing our armed forces. We've done all that, but the only way that we can actually do some good in Ukraine and ensure Ukraine's security is through membership of NATO. There it is. It's out there. That's his demand. Now, having sent out this tweet, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for President Putin, said that if Ukraine does move towards membership of NATO, it will for sure lose the Donetsk and Lugansk, because the people who live there will not tolerate membership of NATO. And of course, he's absolutely right, because if one recalls what happened, what triggered the coup, it was basically the association agreement that the previous president, which was President Yanukovych, he balked. But the key part of that agreement was integration of Ukraine within what they call the European security defense structure, i.e. NATO. And that was clearly the sticking point with many people in Ukraine, particularly those who live in the southeast of Ukraine.
When Yanukovych was going through the association agreement, I think it was like 1,500 or 1,800 pages, which Paul Manafort was pushing for, remember? Okay, I thought a little nice sidebar there. But let me give you a demonstration of Yanukovych reading the association agreement. Where's the money? There's no money in this. Okay. What? Joint military adventures, shared intelligence. Maybe it's on the back, or maybe there's a volume 2. Where's the money? Okay.
Oh, that's right. No, I think that's right. I think, it was, you kind of, missed all that important stuff. But of course, if you look in that document and look as to security and defense, there is an awful lot about that. And that was clearly absolutely front and center of that association agreement. And it led, of course, to the separation of the Donetsk and Lugansk. So anyway, that was what Peskov said with regard to his NATO ambitions. But what's emerging here is, there seems to be two approaches from the West toward Ukraine crisis. So we have a couple of days ago, the foreign ministers of France and Germany issued a very mild statement. Let me read it up, because it's a very short statement. It just says France and Germany are concerned by the growing number of ceasefire violations in eastern Ukraine, which come after the situation had stabilized in July 2020. And then it says that we are closely monitoring the situation, in particular Russian troop movements, and call on all sides to show restraint and to work towards the immediate de-escalation of tensions. Now, notice what it doesn't say there. It is not accusing Russia of causing this crisis, and that is complete diametric opposite of what the people in Washington are saying, who are just ranting and raving, saying the crisis in Ukraine is caused by Russian aggression, Russian provocation. Russia has territorial ambitions against Ukraine. And it was said, and here, this was yesterday at the press briefing by Ned Price. People remember Ned Price was one of those people who left the Trump administration because Trump wasn't belligerent enough. And so he says, we have sent that message very clearly to our Ukrainian counterparts and implicitly to the Russians as well, that we stand by Kiev and we stand by our partner, Ukraine, in the face of intimidation and aggression. That's Sounds to me like an open-ended commitment. I mean, that's pretty much, we're here, we're committed to you. No wonder Zelensky sends out this tweet demanding immediate membership of NATO. So now the question is, who's going to prevail? Is it going to be the cooler heads in Paris or Berlin, or the hot heads in Washington? Washington always prevails.
Well, it's kind of interesting here because America is back. You get the allies back. Get the band back together again. Well, what I was going to say, damage or what happened during the Trump administration is not going to be undone or anytime soon or easily. Paris and Berlin are not keen on Ukraine becoming part of NATO because that gives them exposure. Okay, they don't want, for all the rhetoric that comes out of Western capitals, Berlin and Paris don't want to go to war with Russia. They've got other things to worry about. Okay,
that's so important that message, what they sent out, they're not accusing Russia of aggression. They didn't say Russian aggression. And when they talk about the ceasefire violations, they didn't even say that it's the rebels, the insurgents who are committing these violations. So in a way, they're pretty much saying to Kiev, yeah, you are as responsible as anyone for the ceasefire violations.
Well, I mean, you really kind of spelled it out really carefully, which boneheads like Tony Blinken don't understand. Okay, so when the illegal coup occurred in the first part of 2014, what was the first immediate effect? Crimea left. Yep. Okay, what we call the Donbass on this podcast, they're still there, but they've been isolated from Kiev through sanctions, a war that killed almost 14,000 people, and two republics that are still under siege by Kiev. I mean, cutting embargoes of food, medicine, you name it, everything, and they want it back. Okay, with the people. See, right. What Peskov is saying, my interpretation of his words. Okay, you want to play this? You have Kiev. We'll get the Donbass, okay? Because we will not tolerate another ethnic cleansing attempt of Eastern Ukraine. We won't tolerate it. And it's clear. Hello, listen, sit down, have some coffee. This is what's going to happen, all right? And as far as Crimea is concerned, as you and I have said repeatedly and often on this podcast, is that that's a red line. That's war. You try to attack Crimea, it's war. And the gloves will come off. There will be no apology afterwards, okay? You want this, you're going to get it in spades. And see, what Zelensky is thinking is that, like Saakashvili did in August 2008, that the U.S. will have its back. I seriously doubt it.
No, that's right.
But the game plan is this, ultimately. And it's something that you said Washington always prevails. In a sense, in one scenario, for sure, is that if there is a conflict, Ukraine will lose. But the biggest loser will be Russia, because Russia will be further isolated from the West, and the French and the Germans won't do a whole lot about it, okay? Nord Stream 2, gone, okay? And that's maybe one of the immediate goals of this whole entire However, it doesn't solve Ukraine's security problems, okay?
But it doesn't resolve, but yeah, Ukraine is really almost a kind of a side
different.
Because really all that matters at the moment is for the Americans to provoke a conflict. And what you just said, that scenario where if there is, Russia is forced to intervene and essentially the Donetsk and Lugansk become a part of Russia, that, relations between Russia and the West will be gone for a generation. There'll be no dealings whatever between Russia and France and Germany. That's why it is so important, which is why Putin had that video conference with Merkel and Macron, is that France and Germany need to step up to the plate and make clear that this is, unacceptable. But this is the problem with NATO. It's this artificial, horrific alliance that America's interests are diametrically opposed to the interests of Europe. But by being stuck in this ridiculous alliance, essentially America prevails because America is the dominant force in NATO. I mean, it
By
underlines
design. By design.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a real dilemma here because, Ukraine is kind of a footnote in all of this. They're not going to get anything much out of it, except for maybe a couple attaboys from somebody in Washington, but it's not going to fix their economic problems. It's going to create even more division in the country, more polarization. There's no long-term solution for Ukraine. Okay, there's a short-term solution for certain vested interests, like the Ukrainian military. Now they get to go to NATO headquarters with normal badges instead of being treated as outsiders. I mean, that's essentially what's happened is that there is an Atlanticist element within the Kiev regime. Okay, just like they're all through the Western European countries. And what for Zelensky, really what he wants is probably less NATO membership, because he's suddenly changed. He didn't run on that, okay? He wants EU. That's what he wants more than anything else, because he thinks that the EU can help him bail out his economy. But maybe to get into the EU, he has to make a pitch for NATO, okay?
Well, yeah, because historically, it's always been NATO first. I mean, if you look at, the order of membership, you join NATO, then you join EU. It's never the other way around. NATO first, then EU. Ukraine would be exactly the same situation. Look, Ukraine in NATO, even if Ukraine loses this territory, that territory, that is a serious geopolitical setback for Russia. I mean, there's no question. I mean, that it means throughout Europe, it's pretty much cut off from Europe. In other words, Europe is entirely integrated into a very hostile military alliance directed at Russia. That is a serious geopolitical challenge to the Russians. I mean, so it's like, they have no allies in Europe other than little Serbia down in the Balkans. And, there's not even very much that they can do for Serbia, since to reach Serbia, they have to go through NATO territory. So essentially, America would have succeeded in pushing Russia right out of Europe. Something.
Well, George,
it's a serious.
It's serious, but maybe you should bite the bullet now. I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it. You don't want to have a relationship. Fine, we won't, because to have a relationship, NATO/EU demands that Russia make concessions. That's the only kind of relationship they want, is concessions. Okay, like Putin can't run again for president. Okay, all right. We want to invest more in your oil sector, but you can't invest in ours. Okay, this is what they want, and so I will swallow the bitter medicine on that. But there's other parts of the world. The Eurasian landmass is the future of the world. Let's get to work, okay? Because I'm tired. I'm tired of this, George. Keep moving the goalposts. Have your surrogates like Navalny stir up trouble. I mean, it's one big headache. I don't. What's it worth if you don't get anything from the relationship?
A military alliance directed at Russia, a military alliance that extends through Norway, the Baltics, Poland, Ukraine, Bulgaria, Romania, completely surrounded in Europe by a hostile military alliance. That is one serious geopolitical blow.
But what can
remember?
What can Russia do about it?
Well, what can Russia do about it? I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, it's at this stage, it would be, they have no other choice but pushing to the east. However, that is still something that is a serious problem. I mean, you can't just simply write off hundreds of years of Russian history and be pushed out of Europe and then just simply say, oh, well, that's it. Look, remember, the Soviet Union felt very threatened by the little entente. So it was bad enough that you had Germany, then you had this little entente of powers that were aligned with France, all of which were, France and Britain, all of which were hostile to the Soviet Union, and that the Soviet Union regarded as a dire threat. Stalin. I mean, the reason why Stalin, took parts of Eastern Europe, he didn't want to go back to the pre-World War II era when the Soviet Union was surrounded by hostile states. Here you got the entire European continent is, in one big military alliance with no other role other than hostility toward Russia.
Well, George, you know me very well. Now, I will ask my very usual question with the same answer as I always did. If they can do it, they will.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. Well, I think that's why Ukraine is such an important issue for Russia. That it's really the last kind of grasp on Europe to make sure that this one part of Russia is not exposed toward NATO.
Yeah, or maybe not just the Donbass too. I mean, if it's going to be a complete cut, a complete divorce, then maybe help yourself as the conflict comes to an end. Help yourself to that. I mean, then what is the cost? There's none. I mean, because the doing nothing is the same cost, okay, as doing something. So I say do something, okay. I mean, I don't have any emotions attached to this here. It's this cold, hard ball geopolitics. It's realism right now. If one side, NATO countries under the control of the United States do not want to have a relationship with Russia, then I say, so be it. There's nothing we can do about it.
Well, it's not just about a relationship. It's a question of aggression. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. It's not going to say, okay, Ukraine's now in NATO, done, good. Georgia's in NATO, done, good. We're
well, good. George,
aggression, I mean, aggression will be further into Russian territory itself.
George, one of the things that's really important when you make political decisions is, have things been settled to make a political decision? What makes you think, even if there's a conflict, that conflict will stay simmering for a very, very long time? Because that's when NATO is going to have to start paying a cost. A simmering, frozen conflict that flares up all the time. They're going to pay for this. They're going to get wary of this, okay? And they're going to say, what did we do this for? Okay, no, you underestimate the Russians, okay? I mean, then we have the option, let's just go to World War III, okay? And no one wants to go there. But if you're going to make Russia pay, then they're going to have to pay too. And it will be something that will be unrelenting, unending, and let them feel the pain. And you know who the biggest, the first fellow, we said, this has almost nothing to do with Ukraine. If there is a conflict, it will have everything about how Ukraine pays for this, okay? Zelensky should think about this. He's not sitting on at the table, he's on the menu.
Well, there's no question of that. I do think, though, that a giant NATO that's right by the borders of Russia, with ambitions to go right into Russia itself. Because what's next? Next is the republics within Russia. Next is the Muslim territories of Russia. That's the agenda. Well, NATO's not going to stop there. That's not where it stops.
That may be fine, but I think the attitude will be
the goal is to break Russia up, and that's going to be on next NATO's agenda. It's not just going to be we're going to stop with Ukraine and Georgia. No, we're going to.
Okay, well, George, let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Well, why not? I mean, that's what.
Hang on. Up until this point, Russia didn't have to worry about its sovereignty per se. Now, if there is a conflict and a price has to be paid on all sides, then their sovereignty is at risk. That is upping it to the nth degree. And that's something that, they can't do anything about Poland joining NATO. There's nothing they could do about it, okay? But breaking up the Soviet Union...
Because that moment passed. That moment passed. Because
it wasn't Russia's sovereignty.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Okay. But Russian sovereignty was clearly challenged during the 90s. It will be challenged again. Look, I mean, you have to look.
Russia of today is not Russia of the 1990s.
Maybe not, but you never know. I mean, you have to.
Well, George, the way you're painting it is that we just should shut down and forget and surrender.
Well, the way I'm painting it is that this is a very serious
I agree.
political crisis for Russia, And
why are we talking about this? Exactly.
Say, we Russians, we will overcome all of this. I just don't think that's, you can think about that, because I think this is a serious, very, very serious geopolitical shift against Russia. I mean, it's the fact that Russia has been pushed out of Europe altogether. The fact that Ukraine, which is really a brother country of Russia, has been scooped up, or maybe scooped up, into a military alliance directed at Russia. These are serious, very serious geopolitical crises facing Russia. And then when we move into Russia proper, it's a very diverse country, diverse.
Okay, well, we'll have that conversation if and when that happens. But up into that point, I agree with you completely. Okay, my point is that I don't see what resources and tactics and strategy that are really in Russia's toolbox. I
think at this stage, it's probably
if the Americans want to cause chaos, they have the opportunity to do it. Okay. However, George, the law of unintended consequences are very much in play right now. Okay. If there's going to be an ongoing high intensity conflict going on, the Biden administration it's going to be taxing on them. Okay. And okay, sure, it might bipartisanship, it will come to the fore and all of that. But I mean, he's going to have to decide, more wars in the Middle East, Syria, a flare in Ukraine. I'm not particularly sure that's going to be very popular. Okay, obviously Russia is the boogeyman, and that'll help sell this here. But we don't know what's going to happen here. What we've tried to present to everyone watching this is that it's a one big effing tinderbox, okay? And it is very, very dangerous. And it's not being reported in the media, maybe for the reason that they don't want to have a discussion on this. They want a fait accompli, and they want to force outcomes. But given their track record, it's really, really spotty. So I have a little bit of optimism there. But overall, I have a sense of foreboding.
No. It is not spotty. You have to say that what they've done in Europe by expanding NATO, by pushing that has been a success. That has been a successful policy. We can say that it's a horrible policy, but from America's point of view, we did what we tried to do. We did what we set out to do in 1990, 1991. We pushed Russia out of Europe. We scooped up all of their allies, their military allies. The Soviet Union's military allies are now our allies. We've pushed our forces, right up to Russia's borders. We succeeded. We did what we set out to do.
Okay, George, you're getting a bit apocalyptic here.
I'm not getting apocalyptic, but you have to be.
You are, because
I mean, all I'm saying is that the idea that somehow, Russia's going to do this or Russia's going to do that, no. I mean, this is a major geopolitical shift against Russia. Now, maybe we can talk about its alliance with China and whatever, which itself is fairly problematic, because as we've discussed before, there are all sorts of other players in Asia that will not like any Russia-China alliance. But let's leave that aside. For Russia to be pushed out of Europe in this way is a major shift against.
Yeah, I'm not just.
I'm not a question of apocalyptic. It would have been unthinkable. Who would have thought in 1985 that this is where Russia would end up?
Okay. My point in using the word apocalyptic here is that if half of Ukraine is scooped up into NATO, it doesn't mean the end of the Russian Federation. I'm not going to go that far.
I don't think it is the national Russian Federation. I just think that it's a huge problem for the Russian Federation.
It's a huge problem. It's a major geopolitical shift. I'm not going to argue with you on that. Right. What happens afterwards, I think, is very different. But see, as we speak right now, there are still elements within the political elite and the society at large that have strong positive feelings towards the West, much to my chagrin, but it's still the case. Okay, that's changing dramatically right now, because everyone, Netflix is here too. It won't be after all this, but Netflix right now is here too, and it's in the Russian language. That people are turning away from that. It's very easy to see the aggression against their own country. So there is shifts going on here. But remember, there's a great phrase about Russia. Russia is never as strong as it appears. It's never weak as it appears. Okay, so I'm not counting Russia out. Okay, the Soviet Union was autocratic. It was sanctioned for the entire existence of its statehood. Okay,
But that was the Soviet Union. It's not the Soviet Union anymore. Now it's just Russia. I mean, it was a different thing to have a 15 republic.
Yeah, and George, almost all the republics were a drain on Russia. Okay, economically. Okay, yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Ukraine, but
Yes.
I think that
Probably the only time in history where the center was poorer than the periphery.
right,
okay?
right. But it also provided the country with a lot of security. I mean, that's
Okay, a huge buffer.
giants,
Yes.
you got from Tajikistan and Kazakhstan all the way through to the Baltic states. That is one secure power. You've lost all these, and what is more, a number of these republics, which at the moment have pretty good relations with Russia, they're not all hostile. Once they see that NATO is the coming thing, they have no particular loyalty to Russia. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, of all the republics, only Belarus and Kazakhstan even have Russian as an official language. So, they're not really such reliable allies that Russia could think about. Okay, well, at least we have good relations with Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Well, today maybe, with NATO expansion, they're going to go with the winning team.
Okay, well, that remains to be seen. It remains to be seen if it's winning. Okay, this is, assuming that this is an issue in a vacuum. There's a lot of other things going on as well here. Okay, we can wrap it up, and I want to make myself clear. I'm agreeing with you. This is a dire situation. We're seeing a huge geopolitical shift going on. Russia's security is threatened more than ever before. We have a war of words coming out of Washington. Their puppet Zelensky in Kiev is mimicking it. If something happens, and you and I are very pessimistic, I think something will happen. If it will get out of control, it's hard to say. Once the first shot is fired, then you have the fog of war, and you have hubris in Washington with their animus towards Russia because of the added Russiagate hoax.
No,
it's a very bad situation.
All of that I agree with, but that's precisely what the people in Washington, people like Victoria Nuland, that's exactly what they're thinking. We want to pursue a policy of pushing Russia out altogether, and essentially, destroy Russia as any kind of a serious entity altogether. That's what's going on in their mind. And she's a senior person. She's no idiot. She knows exactly what she was doing. She knew what she was doing in 2014. She knows what she's doing now, and that's their goal. That's why they're quite happy to provoke a conflict. They think any conflict, whichever way the outcome goes, is bad for Russia.
Yeah, and that's why they'll probably try to pull it off. Right. We'll see if the law of unintended, particularly when it comes to Ukraine. Right. Okay, they screwed it up in 2014. They may screw it up again, and Ukraine will suffer immensely. Okay, immensely. Because if like I said, if all bets are off, no possible relationship is in the cards anymore, then why should I treat you with any courtesies? Okay, it's done. Where the relationship is over, we're divorced. We're not estranged. We're divorced. Goodbye. And and maybe leave a few things behind so that you can remember me. Okay, Ukraine will never be a stable state if something goes wrong. It will never be.
Right. All right.
It will just be, my prediction deep in the future, how much they want to invest in Ukraine. Maybe they really want to invest a lot in Ukraine. But, like I said, as we speak right now, in Paris and in Berlin right now, they're just saying, we don't need this. We don't want this.
No, we don't need it, but that's right. But they will invest enough in Ukraine to use it as a weapon against Russia. That's all their interest in Ukraine. They have no other interest in Ukraine other than to use it as a weapon against Russia. That's all they're going to invest in. Now, Paris and Berlin are being sensible. Of course, they're being sensible. The question is, will their view prevail? Historically, that's not been the case. Historically, the Americans have tended to prevail. They have the muscle. They have the determination. So until France and Germany are ready to stand up to the United States, the Americans prevail.
And we'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. All right, Peter. Thank you for that lively discussion. We will be back. Remember, we are on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.